I tell you what, let's just go ahead and get us started here. There we go. Okay. And like I said in the email I sent out, I've been waiting for Terry's for a long time. To say that Terry is a perfectionist, I think is an understatement. I mean, those of you that have seen his airplane have to agree. And Terry won the Grand Reserve Champion at EAA Oshkosh in 1995. How time flies. And I think the airplane looks pretty much the same now as it did then. So with that, Terry, I'm gonna hand it off, and Paul is being Terry's cameraman today. And so here we go.
Since I had a request that wanted to twist my arm pretty bad, said I want to see this award. So this is the Reserve Grand Champion Award from 1995 at Oshkosh. Okay, there, I did it.
All right, that's a beautiful trophy. I wish I would have one on my shelf, but it'll never happen.
Yeah, I was pretty proud of that. I never really worried about winning an award at all. I wasn't even having it judged till a whole pile of people at Oshkosh, that were Quickie people, kept twisting my arm. You got to get this judged. So I got it judged, and I was quite surprised to receive that award. But I'll try and get back to your list of things to do here. Who are you? I'm Terry Crouch. We're here at Davenport Airport. It's in eastern Iowa, right on the river. The aircraft that I built's a single place Quickie. I started building it in about 1985. First flight was September 14th, I think, of 94. It has 1,000 flight hours on it now. Why did I, well, let's see. How long did it take? I had about 3,000 hours in this airplane. One of these things that's supposed to take, what, 400 or 500 hours or something? Like everybody knows is baloney. But anyway, why did I choose this design? It was economical. I was flying Cessnas, and not a whole lot more to it than that. I didn't have a lot of money or options back then to buy an airplane. So my wife thought to keep me busy for a while. She protests all the time about airplanes, but she was the one that said, well, I figured at least if you were here working on this one, you wouldn't be out working on everybody else's. So here it is.
How old were you when you started it?
Oh, what was I, probably 28 or so?
Okay.
How did I learn to fly it? Like I said, I was flying Cessnas, and I was flying sailplanes. And when I got ready to fly this, I flew a bunch of tailwheel airplanes, mainly J3 Cub, but I flew a Pitts, which went real well. Then I got in the Cub, and it went horrible. I could not quit over control. And once I settled down and figured out what I had to do, it was all good. Then I flew a Centauri a little. And then I flew in some canard aircraft, my friends. I flew Bob Malachek's airplane with him. And the first flight went real well in this. The question was, did you build the whole thing or complete somebody else's project? I built it all with help from friends like everybody else has. With if you need something machined or you need a big layup done or whatever, you call in reinforcements. I do not have a blog or website. Now that stuff even existed back then, as far as I knew anyway. I already covered the first flight and how many hours it has. Haven't flown a lot lately because I've been working on another project over here in the other direction here, but that's another story for another day. Typical cruise RPM and a fuel burn. This thing cruises about 100 mile an hour, burn about 1.8 gallon an hour, about 3,600 RPM, the prop that's on it. Farthest I've flown, when I flew to, would have been a trip to Sun and Fun. That's like 1,057 miles. We did it in a day. I flew down there with a friend of mine, another airplane. Most interesting trip. They're all interesting, I guess. Nothing really stands out. Florida was interesting. Enid was interesting. They're all interesting. Whether it's the flying to your destination or what you're doing when you get there. Haven't had any real big scary flights or anything else like that. Modifications from the plans, there's quite a few. The probably the one that's not, it is per plans, is the LS1 Canard. This is one of the few airplanes flying with a LS1 on it. Or as mods to this airframe though, the axles on this are, they started out with a pretty narrow wheel pant, and then wheel bearings are right next to the edge of the wheel pant, the small wheels. Then they move the wheel pant wider, bigger tires, wheels, the wheel bearings move more inboard, so they put much more of a bending moment on the axle. So people were bending axles. So I had a friend of mine as an engineer, reverse engineer that, and we ended up with a 4130 axle that's about 65 thousandths wall, and it's been fine 1,000 hours. I've never had any problem with the axles. The brakes, I changed those. They're still scrubber brakes. The instead of a flat plate hitting the tire, I've got a curved plate, so I have a lot more surface area hitting the tire. The brakes are still anemic, but they're better than a per plans one. I also have toe brakes on this that are essentially a Pitts S1S rudder pedal. Instead of the arm, when you push on the toe brake part of it, instead of the arm pushed on a master cylinder, this one's reversed, so it pulls on the cable for the brakes. I really like the individual brakes. We can maybe get a picture of that. We're gonna need more light.
Look at how clean and neat that all is, man. What a difference from mine. It's just a tangled mess.
How's that looking, Paul?
That's fine.
So you get a clue there. Rudder pedals look like. There's a NACA inlet on the bottom of the lower cowl that gives me cockpit air. That's what that scat tube is there. That works real well. And that way, if you're flying in the rain, you can stay dry.
Well, Paul, let's get a shot of the overview of the whole aircraft, then we'll go in and get the detail. Look at that shine.
Okay, so the this airplane has a rudder or a reflexor, which is same as most Q2s. It was at probably wrong. I think it was Bob Faulkner or something. It was a Canadian designed phenolic little disc that turns in a ring. And that works beautifully. I had after I'd flown this airplane a lot, I did away with the pitch. Trim springs are still there, but they're just fixed, and I just do all my trimming with the reflexor. The rudder on this airplane is removable. The tail spring's removable. This is my own design of a tail wheel. I wanted a steel spring because people were breaking tail wheel springs, probably because they were crashing the airplane, but they were breaking them at any rate. And I'm like, well, if I clobber the thing on, I really want the spring to be could have nothing. So this is a 5150 steel spring at about 42 Rockwell, so it'll bend before it breaks. So like a lot of steel tail springs and a lot of the home builds, there's a single bolt back here that is 90 degrees to the tail spring. So it's threaded into the tail spring. There's a steel socket and a steel tube welded to that is potted here in flocks, just like you'd pot in the fiberglass spring. So if you want to remove the tail spring, you take the bolt out, slide the tail spring out. Then you can take the bolt out here and slide the arm down for the rudder. If you look at the other side here, the rudder is driven just on one side. There's no cables like per plans. I didn't like some of these people had pulled with hard landings, the recoil on the spring had pulled the lower hinge out of the rudder. So the geometry on this is such that when it bounces, it doesn't really change the rudder deflection. So far that's all worked out well.
Harry, were people breaking the springs on single place quickies? I know, of course, on the Q2s and all, we were breaking a lot, but did they have the same problem with the singles?
Some of them did, but like I say, they probably clobbered them on hard enough that something was going to have to break anyway. So
okay.
I guess we'll take a look inside the cockpit again briefly, and then we'll go take the cowl off. A couple other features on this airplane. There's a canopy breaker here. Hopefully I never have to use it. It's patterned after the ones that were in the Tweety birds in the Air Force. So they pull the pin out, take the canopy breaker out. This is very similar to the Tweety bird ones, but it's a little bit lighter. There was plans for this in sport aviation long ago. And there's a fire extinguisher over here. The reflexors, this is the mount for the Garmin 90 or Garmin Pilot 3. Reflexors down here. Fuel valves per plans. Most of the rest stuff's per plans here. This front panel is mounted to the fuselage instead of the canopy because there's definitely more weight there than they envisioned when they put a few instruments in there and went flying. Since everybody's opened up the back of their airplane, give you a quick peek back there, but there's not a whole lot in this one. If you can get anything there, Paul, but you see the reflexor there and the reflexor cable, and not a whole lot going on back here. Okay.
It's so nice and neat and clean. No globs of epoxy all over the place like mine.
It's a little sandy when you finish things up. Yeah, if you just keep cleaning up things as you go, it looks pretty nice when you're done.
Where did you get your engine?
This engine came from Quickie Aircraft. It's almost 20 horse. A lot quicker when you have most of the screws removed.
Nice.
The carb heat box on a per plans airplane has a single butterfly in here, and well, I'll back up a second. I'll say I was pretty late to the party, so most all the stuff in this airplane, somebody else figured out. I read the newsletters and used most of the good ideas and benefited greatly from all the newsletters and stuff that Jimmy Maysel, Robert Hurd started way back when. So anyway, one of the things that came up was the carb heat box. For carb heat, there's a, walk around this side here for a second. There's just a little carb heat muff or whatever. This is not for plans, but works well. But anyway, got a carb heat muff, got a little piece of hose, goes up the carb heat box. And there's a butterfly that, it didn't have an air filter, but butterfly that closes off the incoming air. So then it's drawing hot air. Well, the people figured out that it's drawing hot air part of the time anyway. So this one, run around the other side again. Thank you, Paul. It's got a butterfly on both ends. So if I turn off the carb heat, it's turned off. You can run a mechanism there once, but supposedly, according to the newsletter, that was good for about 50 RPM. I've never tested it personally, but the carb heat works good. And once in a while you need it. I may have had it ice up in the air once or twice in real bad icing conditions, but it will ice up on the ground pretty readily first thing in the morning if it's cool out and conditions are good for carb ice. These things are very marginal in cooling. You really have to have about every last little bit you can sealed up well, or they're not going to cool very well. I had a problem. Well, I started flying in September and everything was fabulous. Well, I got it too hot on the first flight with a instrument problem and me climbing it too slow. After that, I got a little wiser and everything was great until next year when all the hot, humid weather got here. So then when the hot, humid weather all got here, I'm like, well, I got oil temp problems. So I ended up making a oil cooler that's in the bottom of the sump, which is kind of hard to see here. You can see that's the fins on the front. They're about twice as tall on the back. And then there's a bunch of channels inside there. So the oil's pulled through those channels and cooled, and it works pretty effectively. If you look on the other side here, it does have an oil filter. It does have a charging systems per plans with the addition of a full wave rectifier, makes it a little more efficient. The one thing that's important on the Onins is you have to have braces on the exhaust pipes, which they didn't have for Quickie aircraft, and a lot of people had pipes break off, sometimes lost airplanes over the deal.
Yeah.
So I have a real heavy spring in here, and this is somewhat slotted, so that pipe can move a little bit. It's not retained completely solid. This pipe's usually not a problem. It's usually the left one that I had a bunch of problem with cracking before I put these springs in here and slotted that so things could move a little bit. Because when you have a pipe that makes almost a 180-degree change, this thing's going to change a lot heated and cooled as far as the dimension of it. So quite a bit difference in inches of surface area one side to the other.
Could you explain that spring a little bit more, Terry? I can't quite see what you're pointing at and how it works.
Easy to see on the other side.
Okay. If you look at right here, the spring, this little tab here is slotted.
All right.
So this pretty heavy spring here puts a bunch of tension on this. So it can actually slide in there a little bit, but it's before I did that, I had no problem with this side. I had repeated problem with this pipe on the other side cracking here. And after I did that, I've had zero problem with this pipe. So they got to be tied up, but they also have to be able to move a little bit. So that was my solution, and it ended up working out well.
And the other end, looking back at the other side, sorry, Paul, but looking back at the other side, what is the other end of the spring attached of the support rod attached to in there?
Attached to the Kevlar motor mount.
Okay, so that actually attaches to the airframe and not the engine then. Okay,
Well, it attached to the mount itself, which is solidly bolted to the back of the engine.
okay,
Yeah, it's definitely got to be bolted to the engine somewhere.
all right. Yeah, cracked pipes in flight is no fun. I had that happen one time, and next thing after that is fire. So it's a big deal.
That's supposedly why that Quickie was lost in Ohio here a few years back. The pipe broke off and overheated stuff and messed up the fuel system.
Yeah.
Let's see what else is on my list here. That's pretty much it with mods. How much time we got, Sam?
It gives me a 10-minute warning, and I haven't got that yet. I haven't been paying too much attention. Probably about another 10 minutes for this session. Yeah.
I go on and on about owning engines, I guess, but it's all been in the newsletters. There's like most of the Quickie guys know, there was originally Quickie came out with their 22.5 horse conversion, which is baloney. They milled the heads 60,000 and cut half the throttle shaft off and charged $300 and said you're good to go. We'll put studs in the heads in the block. When they did that, this is all going on long before I got going. It was in all the newsletters. People were having all these problems with head gaskets and pulling studs out of the block and so on and so forth. And then somebody came along with a part number. It might have been the Anderson Little guys, but they came up with the stock 20 horse owning heads and a improved head gasket. That's what pretty much everybody's been using forever. And that eliminates most all those problems. The people said even those heads would crack eventually. And I'd been looking at that all along, and I had inspected the heads for cracks like 15 hours before I had one fail. And I had the one fail, so I was a 1-cylinder airplane. Took off, failed, I put it back on the runway. I got to looking at the other head, it too had cracks, but hadn't failed yet. So they can fail catastrophically. And I was going to manufacture my own cylinder heads, and got to looking at a newer variation of that cylinder head from Onan, and they designed pretty much exactly the same I designed. So I bought those and put those on. So hopefully I'm good for a while here. But that, like I say, that was about the 865 hour mark, I think, when that happened. No, oh wait, I could be wrong. I think it was more like 600 some hour mark when that failed. But what else?
What prop do you have?
This is a Cowley prop. This is a 3042.
3042. We got a question here. It says Terry used green urethane foam, right? How is that holding up after all these years? Any deterioration as far as you can tell?
I've not had any problems to date. I thought seriously about using something different at the time, but everything's a little bit heavier, and I was like kind of leery of getting the thing too heavy or something, which is got too heavy anyway. So
Okay.
so far so good, but they're very easy to damage with urethane foam and a single layer bit over them.
Back on the engine, I just had a question out of curiosity. The Onan engine, is that the same engine that's used in RV generators and things like that? Or what's the original application for it?
Yeah, it's used in generators, lawnmowers, all sorts of things. And Onan's quit supporting these now. So I used to all just go to the Onan dealer and buy whatever I wanted. And now they say, well, it's obsolete. So you could still find a lot of stuff on the internet, but one day it's going to be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
I went and bought a bunch of stuff on the internet a while back just to make sure I'd keep going for a while yet.
Okay. All right, we just got our 10-minute warning. And anyway, okay. Carry on.
Okay, I guess if you look at the cowl here, bottom cowl, this is a neck inlet that feeds the cockpit air. This little air intake for just the oil cooler. And if you look at back on the bottom of the engine here, when I had the engine part the last time around, put a sight gauge in it, just so I can look through the grill in the front there at the sight gauge. And I have to pull the dipstick out to check the oil. It's usually not using oil anyway, so it's just like one less thing to do. It's easy to check. The spiral strainers, well, a couple things about the canard. There's not very many of these flying that I know of. The LS1 canard, they had an error in the plans that all the unidirectional cloth that ties the spars together on the bottom, the plans called for 3 plies. I looked at that and went, that can't possibly be right. So then I called Quickie Aircraft, got a hold of Gene Sheehan and said, I think you got a problem here. This can't be right. He's like, no, it's right. I'm like, you telling me 3 plies of uni is going to hold these spars together, take the landing gear loads and everything? And he's like, well, let me look at that. So he comes back and says, well, that's just a typo. I'm like, well, that's kind of important, isn't it? Well, what's it supposed to be? So they did send out a certified letter to all the people that had bought spars at the time for 15 plies, I believe it was, instead of 3. But
a typo.
Yeah, just typo, don't worry about it. So if anybody's one of those, pay attention to that.
So you have the LS1 canard, which is unusual for the singles. So how did you get involved with the LS1 and where did that thing originate from?
It came directly from Quickie Aircraft.
Well, I mean, is that like the one for the Q200 just chopped off a little shorter, or?
Yeah, they claimed it was a whole different deal. And I took my hot wire templates and Paul's hot wire templates, and they're essentially the same thing, just scaled down.
Okay.
They claimed the twist in it was different and everything, and not that I could see. The spiral strainers, when I built those, well, I'll back up a second. When I got to flight testing this, they said just use the same numbers for the control deflections and stops as the Q200. So I'm like, okay, so I did. And in flight test, I could stall the rear wing. I mean, I knew from talking to guys that were test pilots and stuff, I'm getting this thing slowed up and I'm getting Dutch rolls and stuff. And there was like, well, don't go any further because you will end up possibly getting the thing in a deep stall or something. So I had reduce the max, down deflection of the elevators by about half, I think, if I remember right. And I was pretty well done flight test, and I had Paul was doing the video, I believe, and we're at 4,500 feet or so, and I'm aggravating the thing with full deflection and the rudder and aileron, so it's bobbing pretty significantly, much more so than a GU will do, and rolling right and left a little bit, and then it's just upside down the way it went. It was 4 frames on the video as a VCR from upright to inverted, so it's almost a snap roll.
Wow.
And it was very scary to watch.
And it recovered normally, but after that, I'm like, yeah, I apparently need less elevator deflection. And there's a big difference in the LS1 on mine and a GU. I've only flown Keith Welsh's GU, but Keith Welsh's GU, you pull it back, so it stalls, and the airplane will bob up and down your typical stall, not that many degrees of oscillations. And if you pull back more on the stick, it just does the same thing. It doesn't really change much. On the LS1 that I have, if I pull the stick all the way back against the stop and it's sitting there bobbing, well, if I pull it all the way back till it stalls, it'll bob up and down a little bit, and I can still pull back more, and the amplitude increases dramatically. And I have it set now where I'm pretty sure I can't ever I know I can't get in trouble flying normally if I'm all cross-controlled trying to aggravate it. Who knows what you get in the turbulent air or something dumb, but it's real manageable the way it is. It's pretty much totally idiot-proof.
What are your speeds, your downwind, base, and final air speeds?
Well, they're whatever I want to be. Unlike a Q200 or something, this thing will fly hugely slower. I generally figure nobody can see me, so I generally fly downwind at about 100 and base at 80 or so, and turn final at 80. And it's so light, not a lot of inertia to slow down. There's no problem slowing the thing down. It slips real well. So, and I can cross the numbers at 100 mile an hour on this almost, well, 58.
No, it's about 5,000.
5,000 foot one. They changed a little bit. Anyway, they said 5,000 foot runway. I can cross the numbers and I can land a thing, cross the numbers at 100, and it'll still slow down without doing much of anything and land and roll off the end fine without a whole lot of braking. But if I want to fly real slow, I can fly around the pattern at 60 and land about 60 or even slower, and make the first turn off every time if I want. But it's like, why, you know?
Nice. Oh, we almost got a shot of that handsome cameraman.
We don't have one this morning.
Here, all you got to stand up, turn around. The sun's not good. There's the cameraman. Doing a great job, isn't he?
Hear that.
Okay. All right, Terry, the question was, if you didn't have the Onan available now, is there any other engines you would consider for this aircraft? Or have you ever thought about putting a different engine in it?
I think all of us that fly these things have been looking for the great engine for ever since they came out. I don't have an answer for you. The only other engine that's been put a bunch of quickies is a Rotax 2-cylinder, like a 503 or variants, 447. Other than that, I have no answer for you. Or I'd already have that engine in there if it was the nice 30 horse reliable 4-cycle engine.
And John had the Thunder Quickie.
Yeah, the guys that put the 2-cylinder Volkswagen in there, the drag goes up so much with the cheeks that are so much wider that the airplane is probably a little slower than the Onan, but climbs better.
Huh.
The 4-cylinder Volkswagen, I didn't want to go with all the weight for that. I figured you need a different airplane. It's really too bad the perfect engine for this airplane's never come about. There have been a lot of things tried that were unsuccessful. There's been a number of several of the 25 horse rigs Patents put on, but they get the airplane all going and taxiing, and then you never hear from again. The one guy I was talking to for a while said his vibration level was unacceptable. He didn't fly it. The others, I have no idea what they're doing. I know of nobody flying any of those. There were some wankles that people tried. They said the thing as smooth as could be, and they got it in the airframe, and the airframe shook so horribly they couldn't even believe it. So if you're going to embark on a different engine, that's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah, it sure is. What about the smaller Jabiru? Any thoughts there?
It's still a lot heavier than Onan, I think.
Yeah.
And it's significantly wider. I looked
Okay.
at the HKS stuff. Once again, that's like 60 horse. It's a heavier deal once again, but it has a external oil tank and stuff that needs to be below the engine. That creates kind of a problem. And they claim that needs to have their exhaust on it too, which is a problem. So it's not a cheap engine, but if it would fit in there and it was would do the job, I'd probably pay the money for it.
Okay, open it up for any other questions right now. In fact, I'm just gonna go ahead and unmute everybody. I guess everybody is unmuted. So if anybody has any questions, shout them out. And if let's see, what else do you want to show us on the airplane, Terry?
Oh, I think I covered most of it.
Question from Southern California. This is Phil. I had a question. There was a magazine article early on when the Quickie was being first brought to market, and it made a lot of claims about airspeed and fuel efficiency. Did it essentially meet all of the criteria that it set out to meet, or
No, it was almost all baloney. Yeah, most things are 100, 110, a little faster airplanes. The what will tip you off real quick is they can tell you, if you look at that same literature, they'll tell you what props they sell for this aircraft. And if you do the math for the prop, you take that size prop, pitch and stuff, and the RPMs the engine runs at, and if you figure 100% efficiency, which no percent efficient, they don't even come close to their own numbers. So right off the bat, you can say pretty well, this is baloney. Yeah, they were at 141 mile an hour, the 22.5 horse conversion. And as far as I know, everybody that ever had the 22.5 horse conversion that took off those heads and put on the stock Onan 20 horse head, the engine ran stronger, more RPMs, and it ran cooler. So, and with that, like this engine, it doesn't have a big carburetor on, which is worth a little bit. I don't think much, but it's only 20 horse, I figure.
So your numbers as far as fuel consumption and your range and all that.
Yeah, I figure it burns about 2 gallon an hour. It's actually better than that. So if you're going 100 miles an hour, I just plan for 100 mile an hour, and you can go easily 300 miles. If you want to run the thing a little bit leaner and get up a little more altitude and stuff, I've done like 450 mile legs.
And how much fuel do you carry, and what fuel do you use?
I use the car gas pretty much exclusively with no alcohol. The around here you can get it, and I usually just check it anyway, see if there's any alcohol in it, because that's easy to do. The in all these years flying it, it's like 27 years, I guess I've been flying it now. I haven't had any fuel tank or fuel system issues with the car gas. Like I say, I'm burning stuff with no alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
I have had in situations where I can't find fuel with no alcohol in it and burned it, and just burned it up quickly and didn't worry about it. I do a little aux tank for 2 gallons if I really want to. When Ottawa Quickie fly-ins kept moving further west, it was tough for me to get off work on Friday and get that far west. So I put a little aux tank in there so I wouldn't have to stop for fuel to make the further, Burlington or some of the other places we had out there that we were having the fly-ins at. Other than that, I don't generally use that tank much.
So with your aux tank, what's your total fuel capacity?
About 10 gallons.
Okay. I got a question here. Do you have a ADS-B installed?
I do not.
Okay.
No transponder, no ADS-B.
But you do have a radio.
Oh yeah.
Could you show us your instrument panel a little bit? I don't think we've seen it yet.
Okay. Light's kind of not the best for this, but so on the left, vertical speed, clock, turn of bank, navcom, airspeed, altimeter, voltmeter, ammeter, hour meter, tack, EGT, CHT. There's a switch you can flip right and left. Oil pressure, oil temp, manifold pressure, fuel gauge. Compass is back a little further here. Pretty simple compared to most airplanes nowadays.
Yep. What Navcom is that you have?
It's a Narco Escort 2. Narco's out of business now, so hopefully it'll continue working for a while yet.
Yeah. And I like your fuel gauge over there. Is that the stock fuel gauge?
No, the stock fuel gauge was a plastic tube and a wood dowel and a piece of foam on the end, and some people had problems with them, so I wanted something that was removable. So what I did is I took a Piper gauge and modified it. I had to make a different float for it, a different rod, because the rod was a solid rod, it was too heavy. And then so this threads into the tank, so if it's have a problem with it, I can remove it. And I did have to replace the plastic tube, and at one time it started cracking, crazed and stuff, so I did replace it. But other than that, it's been in there for 1,000 hours and it works real well. So the instrument down here is just an outside air temp.
Okay, I was wondering about that. Someone said, if Nathan Peck is still flying his. We had Nathan on a Q tour a couple of months ago, and he's still flying it occasionally.
Yeah, he hasn't flown it much at all in recent years that I know of. He is a comment on he flew with the Onan and he flew with the Rotax, and I think it was all in the Zoom meeting, so I won't go over it again, but he doesn't really care for the Rotax all that much in the Quick. Says he's more flying the engine than he is the airframe now.
Hey, Paul, could you go back and show the back of Terry's panel again and hold it a little bit still? Because I always enjoyed looking in there and showing how neat everything is back there. His wiring is just spectacular as far as I'm concerned. That's why he won the big prize. Yeah, looks great.
It's a switch.
The little switch there that Paul was just asking about is it'll change the range of the tachometer. Change the red line. The reason I had this tachometer, which they haven't made in years, it was very accurate, like to 1 RPM, and it is not tied into the ignition system at all. So some people had like the tachometer short and take out the ignition. We only have a single ignition airplane. That's not too good. So I wanted something totally separate from the ignition system. So there's a little photo sensor on next to the flywheel, and that's why you saw the flywheel with the black and white marks. It reads those marks on the flywheel.
So, all right, Terry. Well, I want to thank you very much. Always love your airplane. Your workmanship is stellar, and happy to get you in here. And
Well, thanks for having me.
Did you want to say anything about the cozy? No.
Say that again.
Paul was asking, you want to say anything about the cozy? And I'm like, that's a whole other.
Yeah, let's run back there and take a quick look at it. Okay, we got a little bit of time. How long have you been working on the cozy, Terry?
Too long.
Yeah, well, that's the nature of this business. It's looking good. And how much longer till it's done? Too long.
Not too long. I'm retired. I retired in May, so hopefully things will move along a little faster.
All right, that's great. All right, Terry. Well, thanks very much for doing this. And like I always say, it'll take a couple of days to get it uploaded. When I upload these things, I have such a slow internet connection out here in Murfreesboro. It takes about pretty close to 24 hours for the video just to upload itself. And that doesn't include the editing we do. So anyway, thanks a lot, Terry. Thanks a lot, Paul. And we'll see you next time.
Okay, thanks.
All right,
Thank you, Terry.
Yep.
bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.